All through history, games of all types have had an intimate relationship with war. If you go back and look at chess, this is really just a sort of abstract version of the battlefield that would have been useful for military commanders to play. Although, of course, real troops don't move in the same patterns as chess pieces. It sort of teaches the player some of the theories of when to attack, when to defend, feints, and trying to fool the enemy. All of these kind of things.
It's so hard sometimes because just the language we have in video games, the existing technology we have in video games, always the grain of that. Wood has a grain when you're working with it, and so does video game code. Video game code also kind of has a grain when you're working with it, and that grain usually tends towards arcs towards violence. And I wish we could change that, and I'm trying to in my own way.
There's a very straightforward technical reason as to why the gun is so prevalent in video games. It's because it's perhaps the best human invention to be able to affect the environment in front of you, both near and far. Using a gun, I can shoot a foe as they run in, at very close range, and I can also line up my gun and shoot a button on a wall 100 meters away to open a door that I need to. So for a video game designer who sort of converses in the language of tools and actions and verbs, the gun just is this wonderful tool for being able to give the player ways to respond to different situations. And for that reason, really for the last 3 decades, the gun has sat sort of nodding in the center of the screen. It's almost like video game worlds are built around the centrality of the gun. It's right there.
Some video games are just extensions of gun culture, right? That if you go down to the gun shop and you like to you go to the range and you like to shoot guns at the range, and then you come home and you're playing a game in which you like to shoot guns, those things are not that different. But they can be quite different. Obviously, it's a complicated question, right? In some ways, it's an extension of gun culture, but in some ways, it's a work of art about guns.
There are some brilliant stories that exist in gaming that literally could not be told, at least not adequately, without violence. So one excellent example of this is the Italian narrative game, The Town of Light, which is about a young woman in Mussolini's Italy who's been committed to a mental asylum. And it's based on a real place, Volterra, which was Italy's largest mental asylum for a number of decades. And this game is meant to tell a sort of composite story of actual young women who were interred in Volterra and their experiences at the hands of oftentimes sexist, rapacious, murderous even staff. And you cannot tell that story without these rather grotesque scenes.
As video games have started to cover more topics, we've started to make claims like, oh, video games can kind of teach you empathy and things like that, and video games can affect you really emotionally. But so many people in the video games industry want to both say that and also claim that violence has absolutely no effect on the player. And as I said, there's no scientific evidence that proves that there is any link between playing violent games and becoming a violent person. But I do think that we who work in video games need to consider kind of all things that games cover and the fact that they can have some effect on us.
A lot of my favorite video games are about shooting people in the face and then their body like flops to the floor. And those are fun games that I enjoy playing. But I think if you want to bring video games forward as some kind of important, vital cultural medium that's relevant to everyone, pursuing a life of violence is not a relevant pursuit for many people around the world. So I think if we want video games to reflect culture and reflect the depth and wide breadth of all human experience, we need games that are also about dark candlelit dinners. We also need games that are about holding someone's hand. We need games that are about giving a hug, but not too long of a hug. That would be weird, but not too brief of a hug either. All these things are so deep and compelling, and I feel like sometimes I want to scream because there's so much of life that we're not capturing in video games yet, and I just want to try to do that.